Hello and welcome to another edition of Gotham Sound TV. I am very, very excited to be talking to Get Wireless. Get Wireless's Mike Anderson. Mike's joining us by Skype. Mike, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
So, Mike, I think I want to give viewers a sense of what we're doing. We're talking about cellular routers and cellular connectivity. I do notice that Skype is a little blurry on it seems. Let me just flip over to Skype and see what's going on there. All right, and anyways, I'm just going to continue, and we'll wait for Skype to get better. Yeah, I mean, with COVID, distant production has really required the use of remote connectivity and really required distant producers and distant crew. And I want our viewers to get a sense of the kind of solutions that Get Wireless and Peplink can provide. So I wonder, we'll start off by, let me ask you, what is a cellular router?
Yeah, so a cellular router is basically a router that has cell service built into it, much like an iPhone or whatever Android phone or any type of device like that that connects to a cellular network. Same thing with the cellular router. And it's used for many different reasons. One, it could be used because you might not be able to get a wired line ran to where you are physically located. Mm-hmm. Because of the cost or the timeline, things like that. Or two, it could be just because the connection that you have from your wired internet connection could be slow, and you might be able to get it faster through cellular. You might even be able to take it remote, so you need cellular connectivity while you're driving down the freeway. If you're doing whatever, if you're on a Skype call, as you're a passenger in a car or on a bus, you can stay connected anytime, basically.
And so they're often portable. Mm-hmm. And I understand, of course, Pepwave have a whole range of different routers. They're often portable. They're meant to be on location. Putting mm-hmm. them on a bus is not, or a vehicle is kind of what some of these products are designed for. Can you show us the range of products?
Yeah, sure. Give me a second. Let me go into the presentation here. Mm-hmm. So with Peplink devices, here's their lineup that they have. They have all sorts of different series of devices. Mm-hmm. So they have what they call a balance router. A balance router is mainly a wired router, kind of like what here I have in my office. I have one there, and then I have a cellular router for the backup, which we can talk about later. But they have a whole series of devices just dedicated for mainly the wired side. And then some of those have built-in cellular connectivity. Then they have a whole series of devices that are one cellular radio devices, great for all sorts of different things, like small office, home office use, remote location use, right? I use mine, wherever I go, I'll take it with me. I throw it in a backpack. And when I get to a hotel, instead of using a hotel free Wi-Fi, I'll use my BR1 Mini as my primary internet connection, just because, I know how that works. It's easy setup. So that's one series. It's great for backup, all sorts of different things. And then they have these, what they call the X series devices. And this is your high-end, your multi-cellular radio. In fact, we can configure one with 18 cellular radios in it. And then, depending on using their Peplink's software-defined networking solution, you can do all sorts of enhanced features like bandwidth bonding. So I can bond all 18 radios together to get a faster throughput device, things like that. And then they have a whole series of devices called transit. And this is what you kind of talked about with bus transportation or any kind of transportation scenario, whether it's, even in a train. So they're certified for shock and vibration, any kind of industry, vehicle industry they're certified for. And these will give you all sorts of different things for connectivity, for remote stuff. Some will have single cellular, some will have dual cellular. So again, you can use some of the advanced software-defined networking solutions like bandwidth bonding or even hot failover. Great for video calls, things like that. Great for failover. So if you're using a wired connection and that goes out, or for whatever reason it's not there anymore, it can flip over to cellular and you can use that. And in most cases, you can do that with SD-WAN. You can do that without losing any packet loss.
All right. So you said so we should definitely take some deep dives into this. Let's start. I want to start with the basics.
Sure.
So what is a cellular radio? What is, and we don't have to go into the electronics of it, but what are we talking about when we talk about a cell radio?
Okay. So it's basically the chipset that talks to whatever wireless carrier you have, and that's built into a device similar to like an iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. So you have your little cellular chip that talks to, it's connected, it has an antenna, and then that talks wirelessly to the cellular towers, right? Same kind of thing with a Peplink device. So, for example, this is something that we can utilize as a cellular router, right? Mm-hmm. So this will have all the antenna ports on it. This will have SIM card slots on it. It will have Ethernet ports, so you can connect a PC or switch or whatever you're trying to connect to it. And in some cases, these will have Wi-Fi. These will have all sorts of different connections. So basically, this is your pathway to the internet. This is my internet access remotely, right? So I don't have to plug it into a source like a wired connection, with an Ethernet cable. I can just hook up whatever I have, either wirelessly or Ethernet, from my PC to this, mm-hmm. and then that gives me my internet access. I'm just using the cell service.
Sure, and will it work with any cellular carrier?
Yeah, so they do get certified on all the cellular. Well, I should say they get certified for most of the cellular carriers. Mm-hmm. They are compatible to work on all the cellular carriers. So whether in some cases there's like the smaller cell carriers. No, they'll work on those. Sometimes they'll have to be certified on them, but most cases the big wireless companies are all compatible with, and there's no issues.
Cool. I also, just as a quick aside, the Skype gods have smiled on us, and you are now coming in at glorious full resolution.
Good.
Now, with cell routers and cell modems in particular, I hear talk of cats. What is the cat thing? It's so confusing.
Yeah, so CAT stands for category. Mm-hmm. The wireless industry, I'm sure just like in the film industry, everything is acronymed. So CAT is category, and there's different levels of cellular radios. And they start out at, like a category 4 right now is the 4G category radio. So it gives you a certain amount of theoretical download and upload speeds, right? So a Cat 4 will give you 150 megs download and 50 megs upload. And then they can jump up in scale. So there's category 4, category 6, category 12, and then category 18. And then after 18 will come 5G, and that will be your gigabit throughput on cellular routers. So some carriers right now, from my experience, what I'm seeing is I can get anywhere from 150 megs down over a device, similar to like your iPhone, but I can get 150 megs down, and the most I've seen up is anywhere in the 80s mm-hmm. up. Mm-hmm.
So why shouldn't we just automatically always go with Cat 18? Is that overkill for a lot, or if we can afford it, should we go for Cat 18?
Well, in some cases, the Cat 18 might be cheaper than some of the other radios, just depending on how the manufacturer prices it. For example, the Peplink Transit Cat 18 device is MSRP is $749, but the Cat 6 model of that same device is $799 MSRP. So it's actually cheaper, but that's all. There's certain different things that the manufacturer sets up because they probably want to, get more devices out that way.
Sure.
It really depends. I mean, the cellular carrier. It also depends on the cellular carriers for the categories, right? Certain carriers might not even offer gigabit throughput right now. In fact, it might take them a couple of years to get out to that just to get to Cat 18 or even 5G. I know they're launching 5G in certain areas, and depending on the carrier, whether you're using millimeter wave or the other technology.
It's middle band, right? It's sort of like,
Middle band or low. Yeah, they have 3 different ones: low, middle, and high band is the other one, like what T-Mobile and AT&T are starting to roll out. So those, different technologies, but still, you could probably get away with a category 6 radio, category 12 radio, just because of where you're located. Like if you're located out, in the rural area of a city, obviously a Cat 18 router might not do anything for you. And in some cases, yes. In most cases, yes, you could save the cost of not spending the money on a Cat 18 router and getting a Cat 6 router. You're going to get the same experience.
Now, our customers have experience with giving up frequencies to cellular carriers. So the frequencies that we used for wireless mics, we had to vacate in order to make room for, it was a host of carriers, but T-Mobile predominantly.
600 megahertz probably.
That's it, yeah. And there's a certain irony that I don't know. It's just an irony. I can't say I appreciate it, but the technology we're using now post-COVID to kind of allow producers and remote personnel to watch dailies is in fact on those same frequencies. Is there a relationship between frequency and category, or is it not necessarily the case?
Yes. Yes. So like a Cat 18 will cover all the frequencies, right? That's the way that Peplink sets it up anyway, is that Cat 18 will cover all the frequency and also bands within those frequencies. So like, for example, on T-Mobile, they use band 71, which is their 600 megahertz frequency. Then the manufacturer will go out and say, okay, we'll include that band as long as it's in, this certain category. So Cat 18 will cover all the bands and all the frequencies. Cat 4, just because that's the one that's been out there the longest, that one might not have the capability of adding band 71 or hitting that 600 megahertz. So yes, they do work hand in hand. Got it.
And so is it safe to say there's a correlation between category and like Wi-Fi classification? Like what, the different Wi-Fi standards in terms of needing bands and throughputs and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's very similar, right? Because they both are wireless and they have the same, they both use frequencies and different ranges, things like that. So yes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I jinxed our Skype resolution, but let's go to your screen because I think that's doing a little bit better. If we look at your screen, and so you mentioned SD-WAN, and I thought that was a good way to kind of talk about the different technologies that Pepwave offers. What is SD-WAN?
So SD-WAN is software-defined networking, right? So instead of, you can use software to find your networking path, whatever. With Peplink, the way that they do it, and this really sets them apart from all the other manufacturers that are out there, all the other cellular router manufacturers that are out there. So with Peplink and SD-WAN, they can really they can provide 3 main feature sets. So before I get into that, Peplink's SD-WAN, it's a VPN technology. So it's a point-to-point technology. In other words, it uses 2 devices. And the 2 devices could be a physical device at the head end, and then you could have a edge device like at a remote location. You could have a virtual appliance that you store in the cloud, like in AWS or Azure, or some of these off-brand ones that you can store a physical or a virtual appliance there, and that could be your head end device. Or you can go to Peplink and you can rent space or as a service for their virtual appliance. So you got 3 different types of connections.
And we'll go into some use case scenarios where this will apply, in a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. We can actually show you a good demo of it as well.
Cool.
I know we're not getting the best connection via Skype, but we can still utilize the connection and show you, like, for example, what it would happen if the primary would go out.
Absolutely.
Yep. So now that we have the VPN set up, there's 3 features that Peplink can provide their customers and our customers. So the first one would be hot failover or persistent failover. And that is when the primary internet connection goes out, it'll instantly flip over to another WAN of whatever type, whether it's another wired WAN or if it's cellular connectivity, right? Then the other option is WAN smoothing. So if that is turned on, and WAN smoothing, what that does is it helps out with the quality of the internet connection that you have. So predominantly for VoIP calling or for video transmission, that will help out with the latency side of things, that where video and voice are dependent on low latency connections. WAN smoothing will help out with that. And then the third one is bandwidth bonding, and that's where you can take all the available WAN links, whether it's wired or cellular. You can bond them together to get a faster throughput of your device, whether it's download or upload.
That's really amazing, and we should talk about that kind of bonding technology. When would I want to choose these different scenarios? Like, why not just do bonding all the time?
Yeah, so bonding, if you think about it, you're going to need multiple connections, and a lot of times you need multiple cellular connections to do bonding on Peplink devices, so 2 or more cellular connections. So the cost comes into factor there. Not everyone can get, not everyone has the ability to buy 18 different cellular plans for one specific device. And then if you scale that to hundreds of devices with 18 connections, it gets really expensive, right? Bonding comes in handy when you need a little bit faster than what you can get in your day-to-day life, right? So let's say you have a couple of SIM cards from the carriers, and you're getting 10 megabits down, and you're getting 5 megabits up. You need just a little bit more throughput for, let's say, your video transmission, right? If you're going to be streaming something, let's say you need at least 15. Well, bonding will help out with that. It will help out with the download and on the upload. So when you combine all of them together, so if you're getting 10 on one carrier, 10 on another carrier, you can bond them together. Now, granted, you're not going to get a full doubling of that because it is a VPN technology. Mm-hmm. So there is some overhead loss there, but you could get close to 15 on a down and maybe 10 on an up.
Interesting. And for everything that's bonded, there needs to be a kind of debonding process. Correct. That happens. Is that...
Yep. So this is that 2-device scenario that I was talking about.
Yep.
So really, the edge device is going to be bonded, and then it will send all that information up to the head-end device, whether it's that physical or virtual appliance, and then there it's debonded. So, for example, you could have a physical device in a, let's say a studio or whatever, and that's where your connection gets debonded, so you can get the information to the actual internet and out.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's try and put this to some real world scenarios. I had a customer call yesterday, helping a synagogue get their services online. Their internet at the location at the synagogue was very, very spotty, and so basically he said to me, "So I just get one of your boxes and I just turn it on and it's magic, right? It works."
Yeah, it's just magic.
What are the,
Not necessarily.
I mean, so I approach it, I come from production, right? So I approach it like, first of all, and by the way, you and I have spoken a little bit before, but, correct me if I'm wrong. But I'll just tell you what I told him, which is, look, we're both sound people. This customer is a sound person. I said, you go where the signal is, right? So You have to approach the cell modem the same way. If your control room is in the basement, that's probably not a great cell signal to get to. So you got to think about where to put the router, and we'll share some pictures. And Jared, if you have access to the beach picture, we should put that up as a link on the Facebook comments. But we have customers that have had a stream from very remote locations on a beach and stuff. And I should mention that Peplink make specific weatherproof modems or weatherproof routers.
IP67 rated.
So they just put this thing on the beach on a high stand. But the same idea applies even if you're in a on a location that's interior. Put the router where the signal is. The other thing I asked him, and I really wish I had a more sophisticated way to have this conversation. I said, "Have you been to the location? What cellular carrier do you have on your phone? And how was your reception?" So is there a way to, like a more professional way to kind of approach that? How would you approach that?
Yeah. So obviously, you could ask. That's a good way to do it, right? Ask around. Okay, what's everyone using out there? Have you seen anybody drop calls? What kind of service do they have with their phones out there? Finding out what carrier provides excellent service out there is one way. On Peplink devices, there's reporting that you can get, and you can download. It's called a WAN quality report, and you can switch it to cellular, and you can kind of get like a report that says, hey, you're getting good signal. And even if you're getting good signal, there could be tons of people in that location. So you could have a good connection from your router to your cellular tower that you're located at, but there could be hundreds of people. Well, not today, but there could be hundreds of people there, like in a big sporting event, or let's say it's a huge movie, and there could be tons of other devices connected to that same tower, all getting really good signal. But you could have a bad quality signal of that. So that means like it's overloaded, right? So on the Peplink devices within what they call their cloud management portal in Control 2, you can see how that connection is. So you can switch it by carrier if you have different carriers in your device. Most of the Peplink device have dual slots where you can put multiple carriers in there. They're called SIM slots. So you can put multiple SIMs in there for different carriers, and then you can see which one is providing better. The other way is there's certain apps that you can download for the phones, and you can get a signal reading, things like that. You were right. Depending on within the building, there's so much more that goes into effect when you try to figure out a wireless router and where to place it. The type of building it is. I've seen places where you can't get a signal to a device. It could be sitting right next to a window. The window tint on an office building could affect signal, right?
Uh-huh.
That could affect it, right? So there's all sorts of different things.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different things that could affect cellular. So one, getting it close to the outside, the closer it is outside will help with signal strength. The higher up too, depending, like if you can get an antenna to the roof of the building, that might help. There's other things that get wireless. For example, we're a value-added distributor. We provide Peplink and other products. Another product that we provide is Nextivity cellular boosters. So in that case, you could put you might not have the ability to move your router, but you could put this Nextivity device. You could put one end of the unit close to the outside where it gets a good signal, and then it could transmit that signal to another device where it provides better service.
Very, very cool. And so let's take a look and see some of the other technologies and other modems that you have. I just have your shared screen up at the moment.
Okay. So the one I'm actually using here today that I have connected in my office, I keep going to the wrong slides, is under the BR series. It's this BR1 Mini. The BR1 Mini is a very popular device, one, because of the MSRP at $299, but really this is basically it's a cellular router, right? You can have it set up for failover, kind of like what I have here in my office, but this is a remote device. It withstands a lot of temperature, so it has a wide range of operating temperature. It can go down to negative 49 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to a positive 149 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have your movies that are in really cold locations, it will work, and whether they're in really hot and sun baking, you can get it to work all the way up to 149 degrees as well. So big, wide range. It's a metal enclosure, so it's ruggedized, and then it has 2 LAN ports, or depending on how you configure it, 1 WAN, 1 LAN port. So if you want, I could do the quick demo of my hot failover scenario if you're ready for that, or we can keep.
I am absolutely ready. Let's try it.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over this screen just to show you guys.
Yep.
So the one you want to watch is this WAN 2 thing. So I'm going to move my video camera.
I'm going to see if I could make this bigger for everybody.
So just to make sure. And then I'll kind of do a little description of my setup. So the description is, this is my internet router. I know it's kind of beefy, but that's all right. In this case, it works. So this is, I get my internet line that comes in. This is the line that I'm looking at. So this is the one that's providing my primary internet connection. And then this line right here is my backup device with my BR1 Mini. So obviously a pretty small device. I have 1 SIM in there. and then I have my Wi-Fi antenna and then my 2 cellular antennas on it. Now, typical scenario, what would happen in, without software-defined networking on a cellular router is if my primary internet went out, I would lose connection to this call, and then I would have to recall back in, right? Mm-hmm. With Peplink's SD-WAN, I can simulate a disconnection by pulling the plug on my primary internet. Even though it's unplugged, it automatically switches to the cellular, and you can see on the screen, WAN 2 is now red. So obviously I don't have any more primary internet connection from my wired internet, and I'm still connected, and we didn't have any packet loss. So
yeah.
You and I talked earlier about video transmission, and in some cases there was a video shoot where the wired connection, they used too much data on their wired connection, and the provider just shut them off. And if they didn't have cellular as a backup, they would have been done for that day, and it would have cost them, a lot of extra money compared to having cellular.
Right. And as you plugged it in, we can see when to kind of it realizes there's a connection now, and it's chugging away, and
correct,
it's
and
connected.
We're connected.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's worth talking about that because I think it's pretty. I think it's a pretty good use case scenario where we had a producer making a commercial. It was a bunch of remote locations in people's homes, and he had described a scenario where he used people's cable modems to get the image back to the control room. And what happens on cable modems, people don't realize, especially at the consumer level, is that there's terms of service that they kind of frown on you doing streaming for 8 hours. So the producer described the scenario where the cable modem just went out. They lost a day. And so then they came to us and they rented actually that very modem for that very reason, where they went hardwired out of the cable modem switch into the WAN port of that BR1 Mini, and then the cellular router in the BR1 Mini was there as a backup, and it had a hot failover. And I think this was another 6 people. He said 5 were fine, and the 6th person, again, like different person, cable modem just stopped working. So it's a great system. The other thing I want to talk about that really can't be stressed enough now that everybody's distant, we've been sending out equipment specifically with Pepwave modems because they make VPN networks so easy. So the specific example that we have, there's a ClearCom intercom system. It's pretty sophisticated, but it's controlled by a web page. And, it used to be that you would be on set and you'd surf into the web page. It's just an embedded device to make changes. But with a VPN and a Pepwave modem, it's trivial. In fact, I timed myself 20 minutes. It took me to spin the server up on Amazon's cloud and then get the VPN credentials that now I'm able to remote into any set, or our technicians are, and troubleshoot something as if we were right there. And VPNs obviously have been around for a long time, but I do have to say, just speaking from my personal experience, you guys make it so easy.
Yeah, so the Peplink side of things, they do it a couple of different ways. So they use, whether it's an IPsec VPN or they have their own called the Pep VPN, and they classify that, that they say, this is possibly the world's fastest VPN, and they get it timed down to 4 clicks to get the VPN up and running.
Right.
Now you went a little bit further because you put a virtual appliance in the cloud, and that probably took the longest part of this whole thing.
That's right.
Yeah, the VPN, I've done it in under 2 minutes because I've had everything already set up, and then I just needed to start the VPN. I can configure a VPN in, roughly about 2 to 3 minutes, and that's typical. Some cases it takes a little bit longer, but on average.
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason I spun up the cloud VPN is because I wanted to be able to hand off the responsibilities of VPNing into any set, shared amongst multiple technicians here at Gotham without need for them to have a Peplink modem.
Correct.
So so in our case, we just did OpenVPN, and
Yep.
that's pretty simple, and anybody can call us or email us, and
Yeah.
we'll walk them through it. But yeah, I mean, the other advantage, and this is something that I kind of found backwards. You now have a static IP address to a cellular modem, which is a big deal in a way. I mean, it's not so easy to sort of get it up and running quickly, a static IP address for a cell modem.
Correct. In some cases, if you try to get a static IP address through the carrier, it could take weeks to get that set up, and the cost for that could be, a pretty good cost additionally for that, static IP. Depending on how it's configured, if it's a public static IP, you could probably get it a little bit faster. But if it's a private static IP and you want it on a private, the carrier private network, that could take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks or 6 to 12 weeks. Think of that in production time. I mean, that's, you got to really prep for that.
No, the production's over by that time. And I'm speaking from my own ignorance.
Right.
You also have to know what those terms mean.
Right.
Like private IP, public IP, and
yep. So a public IP it can be seen, so you can, it's an IP address that's, out there and anybody can go to it. Really, it's 192.168 whatever. And then a private one is it doesn't hit the public internet, basically.
Right, and that's advantageous because the public internet is a dangerous place, or can be.
Right, security reasons, and just use cautious over cellular. If it's a public IP, anybody can go out there and ping that IP, right, and drive up the data cost. So this is another way to control data cost.
Yes, and I would say it's different. Different. What is the phrase? Horses for courses. Anyways, like a production company. That's going to be around in the long term, where they're doing multiple events and multiple productions. That might make sense for them to approach the carrier and do it that way. But for a lot of the shows that we deal with, the production company exists just to make the show. Even if it's a series, it's sometimes just for that season, and then it gets disbanded, and they can't have contracts hanging on. So it makes sense to kind of spin something up temporarily or go through a provider like us to kind of set that up for them. This is a tricky seminar, right? Because we're talking sort of big ideas, and I also want to ground it into the stuff that I've gotten calls for over the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 months. I've lost track of count. But the most typical one is they tend to be commercial shoots, and they, especially New York, has quarantine rules. It's not practical for producers to fly in and then fly back out. So they want to stream, and they want to stream from set, and they want to be able to have their producers watch remotely. And so they sort of have a list of locations that they're going to, and not enough time to properly scout them in the ways that we talked about. Where even just to bring a cell phone and see how your carrier behaves. So now I think we can talk about the idea that even if you have different modems or multiple modems, it may not be to bond them together because you might want to have cellular diversity in a way.
Correct. Yeah. So, for example, my favorite device, the HD4 MBX. So that device has 4 cellular radios in it, each with 2 SIM card slots. So there's 8 SIM card slots in there. Now, the reason I like that device is you can put carrier A in one radio, carrier B in another radio, and carrier C. And now you can have hot failover from cellular connections. You might not even have a primary wireless provider in there. You could just have all cellular connections in there. And it can flip between the two, so you can set it up to say, hey, if I hit, if carrier A has poor signal in this area, let's say, I don't want to use anything that gets less than 2 bars. I want to use 3 bars or more. I can set that up on the device, and if carrier A hits that threshold, it will flip over to carrier B and then carrier C until it gets the one that meets the parameters, if there is one, right? That is a great way to do it. And then the other thing is, we talked about this too, the usage part of it, right? Sometimes you might not have an unlimited plan on a cellular router, and you might have a 50 gig plan, and after 50 gigs, you could be set to data optimization or slowing of the speeds, right? Mm-hmm. They also, each carrier has their own verbiage or legal statements on that, but basically it's slowing of the speeds or data optimization. So the other thing that you can do, because there's 2 SIM slots in there, or you could do this by radio too, is if it hits a certain amount of data by a certain time, like my bill cycle is the 15th of every month, and if I hit 49 gigs before the 15th, I want it to flip over to another card where I get another 50 gigs that I can use up until the 15th, or keep going until, like movie sets, they're going to use lots of data because they're streaming video. So you could have 4 radios, each with that threshold, and utilize that.
And we should get down a little bit to brass tacks in terms of plans, because most of the plans that you can get as a consumer are going to have some kind of slowing down at some, there'll be even if they say unlimited, you'll hit a certain point and it starts to slow.
Yeah, right. They do that for protection of the network, is what the carriers call it. But you're right. Yeah, me as a customer, I can have a hotspot on my phone, or I can have specifically on my BR1, I get about 30 gigs, I think. And then once 30 gig happens, they can slow it down in speeds if the network is congested. So, I can have an additional SIM card in there to answer your question. So,
right, yeah. And so that's probably the easiest way, I think, to avoid that. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're doing this every day, then you should be talking to the carrier as an enterprise or a business customer, and there are different plans available
Correct.
to you.
Yeah. Yeah, you could get they call it a data plan, and in some cases you can get a huge bucket of data, and you can spread it out by the number of SIM cards, and then you pay overage, right, where you might not be subject to data optimization, but you just keep paying for that data. So yes, definitely recommend reaching out to carriers if you're going to need that kind of plan.
And prepaid, is that a thing? Should we be looking at prepaid plans?
Prepaid's an interesting one. So there's all sorts of different prepaid services out there. You'll hear like Cricket, or you'll hear of some of these other off-brand ones that are out there too. Basically, what they do is they do the same thing. They buy airtime from the big carriers because the big carriers have the network. Prepaid is interesting because you pay for a certain amount, and then after that you keep paying for stuff. I'm assuming they would fall under the same rules of data optimization. Most prepaid stuff is consumer accounts. Mm-hmm. The other side of it is, they might have different rules because they're reselling a big carrier service. So, that's a tough call. I'd probably go with more of a traditional plan, but, prepaid, depending on how long the shoot is or how long the service is, it might work.
Yeah. I wonder, let's throw it to your desktop one more time.
Sure.
And there was a slide that you had that specifically dealt with the bonding, and I wondered if we could talk
sure.
about that.
Definitely. So here's my bonding slide,
and I'm going to just move your picture-in-picture around so people can see what is going on. So Speed Fusion bandwidth bonding, got it.
All right. So bonding, basically, it takes all the available WAN links, combines them together, and you get a faster throughput, right? Most of the time in Peplink cases, what I've been finding is that when you have 2 cellular radios or more, that's the devices that can take bonding. So my BR1 Mini that only has 1 cellular radio on it, I can't bond that device. 1, because there's nothing to bond it to, because I just got the 1 radio. So 2 cellular radios or more, or if you have multiple wired WAN connections or more, that's when you can start bonding through the Peplink devices. But again, right, you take your you got to have your 2 devices, your head-end device and your edge device. Mm-hmm. Your edge device would be bonded up into the head-end device, and then it would be debonded, as you called it, at the head-end device onto the internet.
And it's not, I mean, I don't see it as, when we've bonded, we have 2 radios that we bond. And the first time I did it, I did speed test on each one, And then I bonded them, and I was like, "Hey, everybody, look at this! This is going to be 2x," and
Right.
it was not the case.
Yeah.
What gives?
Yeah. There's a mathematical equation that is factored into this to do bonding.
Mm-hmm.
So bonding, obviously, it depends on all sorts of different factors: latency, signal strength, things like that. But if you had, here's my rule of thumb, if you had two identical connections over cellular, so you had carrier A giving you 10 down and 5 up, and carrier B giving you 10 down and 5 up. Again, this is a VPN technology. There is going to be some overhead loss, so it's not going to double it. I'm not going to get 20 on a down and 10 on an up. It's going to be closer to 15 on a down and maybe 8 on an up. So they basically say about 20% overhead. That's pretty a good rule of thumb. So that's kind of what I base it off of.
And is this why, for people streaming video, when they want bonding, to the extent that we've established they might need bonding, and that's not always the case, but we should really be looking at 4 radios for those people that want bonding, because now you're sort of, if that's definitely a concern. But correct me if I'm wrong, bonding still doesn't get you out of the jail of poor reception. I mean, maybe it can if you're on the edge, but no signal is still no signal with bonding.
Correct. In that case, you're going to want to look at something that will enhance the signal. Mm-hmm. I kind of talked about nextivity a little bit, depending on if you're in a building and you get poor reception. That will help out with that, and you might get a faster throughput that way. Yes, so we're subject to the carrier. So if we're on an edge network and we're getting really poor reception, bonding might not help out with that anyway. And in some cases, you might think you need bonding, and you don't. Some streaming stuff you can do over one cellular connection.
Well, yeah. We were talking about that earlier, like we're huge fans of this service LiveX Director, which is its one job is to get video from the set to viewers. It can be within 400 milliseconds, which is amazing at 1080p, right? 2.5 megabits per second is the upload. And by the way, now that we're talking upload, that is the figure that we really want. We're interested in the upload. But yeah, 2.5 is not bonding material automatically anyways. No. Yeah. Well within one radio.
Right. You're going to average, even in bad reception, you could get, 3 megs up. And in some cases, like I said, I was getting 80 up depending on where I go. So you could just use the one radio for that. And it could be a Cat 4 or a Category 4 radio, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have about 15 minutes to go. I have in my notes for this section of our talk secret stuff that Mike is going to share with us. So just tips and tricks. I'll start. One huge tip that I can offer, and it's again for our customers that are sound mixers. It's applying that sound mixer brain. External antennas can make a huge difference if you're in a fringy reception area. An elevation can make a huge difference. So we have, film sets have tall stands and grip departments that have tall stands. We've bought a couple of our own, but at some of the fringe locations, like putting it up on a 15-foot, stand makes a big difference. Omnidirectional is what we started with. Then we moved into directional antennas. And so the trick that we found with that I'll share with customers is you can download you're looking for the downlink frequencies of the different bands in cellular cellular standards, and even a cheap spectrum analyzer, like we sell one for a couple $100, can tune to those frequencies. And that way, if you don't have an app and you're not sure where the tower is, you can literally spin the directional antenna around and find where the tower is, and then lock it in place that way.
How far it is. Nice.
But nice. Yeah, I mean, you came to this from a cellular carrier.
Yes.
And so, any tricks or tips that you can share with us?
The cellular carrier side, that's a good one. Really the thing that I have for tips and tricks is know what you're going to be connected into it. And, for example, the BR1 Mini, it only has 2 Ethernet ports. If you need a device that has multiple Ethernet ports, reach out to us and yourself, because there's all sorts of different Peplink devices. I showed you all the different series that we have there, so that's the thing. So basically, it's the plan, right? I've been to many places where they say, oh, yeah, let's just use the BR1 Mini, and we get there, and they want to connect all these different things. So now we're looking for a switch to plug into the BR1 Mini, and now we got to manage that. So it's just having a plan to set up on how you want to roll things out.
And I almost forgot to mention this in all of our talks. You guys make industrial switches that that take 12 volts. So 12 volts for sound people is like that's the golden number, because all of our stuff, we have to be autonomous and lose AC power without hiccuping. So you guys make 12 volt PoE switches. And we're going to get a couple in here to test. We are particularly interested to see if they work with an audio over IP standard called Dante, but they're managed switches. Yeah. So
there's all sorts of, there's a 8-port, 24-port, 56-port. There's all sorts of different switches that we have.
So yeah, we're very excited about that. In addition to the routers that you make with built multiple ports.
Correct. The other one, I haven't even told you about this one yet, so I'm throwing this on you, is we have a device called a power management unit. So if you need to maintain a certain power, like 56 volts, for example, you can use this device to manage that. You can also use it to control power to a device. So we talked about the school scenario earlier. The schools
mention it to our people.
Yeah. So the school scenario is basically what we're seeing a lot of is cities are putting Peplink routers into a bus, driving a bus to an empty parking lot and turning it on for 8 hours, so students that don't have internet at home can drive to a location, like in the parking lot of the bus, connect to it via Wi-Fi, and get their homework assignments, chat on video, things like that. In this case, you're going to put a bus out there for 8 hours, right? You don't want to drain the battery of the bus from the Peplink router. So this power management unit, or the SD-PMU, what that will do is it will monitor the battery life of the bus, and if it gets to a certain voltage, it will shut off everything connected to it. So it will save the battery so you can drive the bus out of there if you really need to. And in other cases, you can use it to start things up in a certain order. So if you have a camera connected to it and you have something else connected to it additionally that doesn't need to be started up right away, you can say start the camera up right away. Once that's up, start whatever else is connected to it, kind of a thing.
Amazing. And you guys also make the SFE cam. Jared, I'm sorry to throw that at you last minute, but it is something that people should take a look at, which is basically a 2 radio unit with your choice of battery, like film battery, V mount or the other standard gold mount. Thank you. And it can go on the back of a camera and pass the battery power behind it, get power and pass it to the camera, which is really just an amazing form factor. And I can see the day where, based on how tight things are shooting exteriors in New York right now, that will come in very handy, where you're not just trying to stream over Wi-Fi to different people, but you got to stream over wide area network to then stream to a bunch of people.
So the other side of that too is the cable management portion. So the other way to do it is if you didn't have the SFE cam or the Speed Fusion engine cam, that's the technical name for it, you would have wires going from the camera to probably a backpack, and you would have all sorts of different, connections in there. Like the way they used to do it is USB cards plugged into all this different stuff. And the bad side about that is the antennas now are enclosed, they're all talking to each other, where the Speed Fusion engine cam puts it all on the outside, right on the back of the camera, so it sits up high. So yeah, that is a great device. And it has 2 cellular radios in it.
Yes, which definitely in terms of carrier and even bonding can come in handy.
SIM card. Yep.
I mean, we can go on and we can go way deep into the woods, but we're hitting that hour mark. I'm going to open it up to questions. I do want to share first of all, my gratitude. But I want to share a customer's text. Love the stream you're doing. Favorite stream of 2020. I mean, if he didn't throw the 2020 in there, I'd be like, oh, that's a great compliment. 2020. There's been a lot of questionable stuff going on this year. But I really appreciate the feedback that we got. I think this is a topic that I think people really want to know, and yeah, I mean, I anybody can ask us questions. We'll forward them to you, and we'll keep this conversation going. I mean, if there's anything you want to add, I want to say thank you and express my gratitude. I know you're really busy these days, especially with schools spinning back up and remote access required for that.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing all the different use cases that we're finding, now because of COVID, right? Like the bus Wi-Fi, just stick it in a parking lot, or, or even some of the remote monitoring things and video discussions. So yeah, this has been great, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is great for all of us, and I'd be willing to come back and do another session if you want me to.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, he amended it. He said favorite stream ever. How about that? Thank you for watching. It's good to see you, Mike, and good to see you're healthy. Please, everybody out there, stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you on the next one.